Oh, okay. Sorry for my heavy accent first. Um, I am a recent immigrant to this country, and when we come here, all we see at the local, state, and federal level, all the black people are Democrats, including Mr. Obama. And what you are saying, if it is true, then how all these black intellectuals we consider and we look up to, are they all ignorant and they don't know what? Because from what you say, the Democrats are not friend of the slave black Africans. So I was wondering, are they really that ignorant?
This is the kind of question that I like a lot, because it actually pursues the premise that I put forward. If it is true that the Democratic Party was the party of slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, racial terrorism, the Ku Klux Klan, I assert that all of that is true. And why would it be that A, this fact would be downplayed, even by African American scholars, and B, why would they still be unapologetically loyal to the Democratic Party? Now, this is a very complicated question. I won't do full justice to it here. I'm actually writing about this now. But let me say a couple things. Ask yourself this question. It is true that African Americans as a group did move over from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. 90% of African Americans today vote Democratic. Here's the question. When did that shift occur? The general assumption is it must have occurred sometime in the 1960s, because Lyndon Johnson pushed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. African Americans now realize that the Democrats are our friends. Let's move over to the Democratic Party. But it turns out that this is, even though plausible, is actually not what happened. Blacks moved over to the Democratic Party in the 1930s. In 1932, Hoover got 2/3 of the black vote. But by 1936, 2/3 of the black vote went to FDR. In 4 years. In 4 years, blacks flipped from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Now, amazingly, at this time, the Democratic Party was explicitly the party of segregation and the Ku Klux Klan. So blacks left the party of Lincoln and joined the party of the KKK in the 30s. Why did they do it? Well, the obvious answer to it, but it's not the answer that the progressives want to hear, is it was the economic promises of the New Deal. It was the heart of the Depression. Blacks lived in terrible circumstances. I don't fault them for a minute. But what I am saying is it was the economic benefits of the New Deal. Many New Deal programs were segregated. Many of them excluded blacks. But even so, the crumbs that FDR offered were apparently enough to convince a very downtrodden group to switch its political allegiances. So the reason this story is not known, it doesn't fit the narrative. Blacks are supposed to be finding their civil rights friends in the Democratic camp. That's not what happened. So what I'm getting at is, to ferret out the true story of America takes a little bit of work, but it takes a lot of intellectual bravery. And that intellectual bravery is really scarce in America today. You know, when someone like me stands up to say these things in a campus like Yale, we always have to worry, are we going to be allowed to speak? If we are allowed to speak, will we be shouted down? If we're not shouted down, will we be summarily dismissed without any effort to... I mean, I've put at least half a dozen very powerful facts on the table in just 30 minutes. Either I'm right or I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, show me. I'm as public a figure as you're going to find. It's going to be very easy to expose my facts as flawed on social media or anywhere else. No one does. No one does. And so what I'm suggesting is we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to re-examine. I'm an immigrant, as you are. When I first came to America, I went to Washington, D.C. in the 80s. I went to a reception by now Senator Schumer. He was then a congressman from New York. And it's a bunch of us Asian Indians. And he made a very interesting statement. He said, you Asian Indians, he goes, you never ask for anything. He goes, you just come to America, you work hard, you try to move ahead. He goes, you don't understand that that's why we're here. The Democratic Party is here so that you can make demands of us, and we will deliver for you in exchange for your vote. So I listened to this and I was like, could this really, is he actually saying this? But he was. He was actually offering the deal that the Democratic Party offers not just blacks, every ethnic group. They basically say, we want you to come together as a group. This is, by the way, why the Democrats are so big on race matters. Because they need to have each minority group hang together. Because they don't want to convince them individually. They want to get them as a group. And the politics of the Democrats are the politics of ethnic identity. Let's get the blacks, they're 12%. Let's get the Latinos, they're 13%. That's 25 right there. If we get the Asians, that's another 5. Then we're already at 30. We only have to get to 51. Maybe we'll get some feminists, maybe we'll get some gay rights activists. Whoops, there we are, we've got a majority. So it is not a politics of the common good. It is a politics of cobbling together ethnic coalitions in order to loot the rest of the population. Once I figured that out, I had to exit.
Hello, so I apologize, but I want to jump a bit off topic. Okay. So based on the occurrence that just happened in Florida with the mass shooting, Donald Trump had said that he was wanting to arm the teachers. I was wondering if you had agreed with that, and if you don't agree with it, then what would be your solution in that case?
Well, first of all, you know, I made a mistake myself in a tweet that I did myself about the Parkland students. It was in the heat of social media, and social media, I think you know, is something of the Wild West. And so here we are in the social media debate, the give and take of Twitter. And, you know, here I'm turning on Twitter and I see, you know, this student is being coached by the CNN producer. He keeps stopping when he's speaking. They keep telling him what to say. They drag him down. So then I see a meme of the Florida legislature voting on a gun ban. And I see the students magically appear there and reacting to this legislation. So anyway, I did this sarcastic tweet basically saying, gee, you know, this is the worst news they've heard since their parents made them get summer jobs. Insensitive, I must admit. Because my target was the manipulation of the students and not the students. But that was a case where I basically missed my target, you know. Now, ironically, the gun issue is not my main issue. And I'm not, you know, since I'm not running for office, I don't actually have solutions to all the world's problems. I try to focus on things I actually know about. I don't know a lot about guns. I don't know what an AR-15 does. I don't know if it's a good idea to arm teachers or not. I have instincts about things, and I'm quick to spot hypocrisy in arguments. In other words, I've been hearing now for 20 years that you can't outlaw abortion, for example, because people will still go and get an illegal abortion. They're going to get it. They're going to do it. But somehow that logic is never applied to guns. You can't outlaw guns because people are going to go out and get a gun. I say to myself, in this case, in the Parkland case, we know that the FBI got some tips about this guy. We know that there were sheriff's deputies on the scene. So here we have the FBI, we have the sheriff's deputies, we have, let's say, the NRA. Now, which of these three were in a position to prevent the shooting? The first one. Which was in a position to actually disrupt it and stop it? The second. The third has the least to do with it and is, in fact, by and large, as far as I can see, been a pretty responsible advocate for responsible gun ownership. And yet, the political blame is all falling on three. So we're in a very peculiar situation where we're blaming inanimate objects, the gun, when there's actual flagrant violations of human responsibility, which are eminently correctable if we would actually do. So that's my take on the Parkland situation. I'm sorry I did the tweet. I apologize for it. I take it back. But these are my thoughts about the issue in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Dinesh, I want to thank you a lot for being here. So I've noticed that when leftists like to argue about things like evolution and climate change, which granted a lot of people on the right agree with that stuff too, they always use the claim like, well, it's because of science, you guys are science deniers. But then when it comes to like transgender stuff and abortion, the left completely abandons science and biology and they just go for emotion and feelings. When, the facts are there are males and females, that, what's inside the mother is in fact a human, but the left just goes for it, that's a person's choice, or you can't tell someone that that person's not a male if she identifies as a male. I was just wondering what your take on that is.
I do think that science is, it's not new that science is being ideologically deployed. That's actually been going on for a long time. I think what's new is the political correctness of it. So, for example, if you're a climate scientist who dissents from the prevailing orthodoxy, they'll try to make sure you don't get a grant. They'll try to make sure that you can't be at the Rand Corporation. They'll try to make sure that if you're publishing a book, they'll contact Oxford University Press and tell them not to publish your book. Now, that is a whole new level of dangerous. Because when people do that, and when people say, even with regard to my tweet, people are like, let's make sure that this guy doesn't speak anywhere. Let's make sure that this guy... So I'm saying to myself, that's not even the Second Amendment. Now we're talking about the First Amendment. So to me, science is not free of public policy debate. It should be debated. But you're right. There are double standards that are blatantly employed in which science is convenient when it's used, and then completely ignored in other areas. It's almost as if, I think what's happened in our society is that there's a new sense of identity, which is seen as subjective, that trumps biological reality. It's almost as if there is a me, apart from me, that gets to adjudicate what and who I am. It's a very strange idea if you think about it. But it's an idea that's been brewing in America for a while. It's even behind, like when I go talk to my dad and tell him, hey dad, I don't want to go to business school, I want to become a writer. What do I appeal to? I appeal to this inner me, this sort of inner self, as the final adjudicator of which way I should go. These ideas are very American, but reflecting on them intellectually is part of what we should do on a campus. Okay? All right.
Due to the time, this will be the last question. So, yep.
First, I want to say thank you for coming out, especially to a campus where a lot of people disagree with you. But I have to say, I'm one of the people who's probably disagrees with you on a bunch of stuff. And I wanted to ask about, so basically a lot of your arguments seem to be based in history, and the idea that fascism is historically rooted on the left-wing side. But you don't say anything about how that reflects on the current day. And there was a point where you mentioned Hillary Clinton's fascism, but you didn't really talk about the fascism on the left today. And I feel like that would be a stronger argument. And can you say anything about that?
Certainly. Actually, what a fantastic question. It's one thing to talk about racism historically. Where's the racism now? It's one thing to talk about fascism historically. Where's the fascism now? All right. So let me point to two fascist modes that are on the left, very visible, right in front of us. The first is ideological, and the second is tactical. Okay, so let's start with the ideology. What is the meaning of fascist economics? So the fascists were socialists, but they were a very special type of socialists. The fascists believed that instead of the government nationalizing the corporations, which is basically what socialism does. Socialist countries, like India, would nationalize the banks, or nationalize the airlines, or nationalize the energy sector, and so on. The fascist solution was different. The fascist solution was, we'll let the companies stay private, but we will have the government control them. The government will be like a quarterback, or a muscle man, directing these companies as to what to do, and it'll be, so state regulation of private business was the fascist mode of socialism. Now, interestingly, in the Obama era, over the last 8 years, we have seen essentially the federal government take control of the banks, the investment sector, largely the energy industry through the EPA, the healthcare industry, every hospital, every hospice. Now again, we have private insurance companies. But the way this worked is that Obama got them into a room and strong-armed them. He said, listen, I'm going to take you over, and you're not going to like that. But I have a sweetener for you. I'm going to force tens of millions of Americans who don't want to buy health insurance to buy it. And that's going to mean untold profits for you guys. So you need to buy ads supporting my program, which is what the health insurance companies did. So this was the dirty racket called Obamacare. But my point is not even to complain about the racket, but to point to the fascist element of it. The idea of government control of the private sector. I mean, here's Obama firing the head of General Motors. Only in a fascist country does the president of a democracy get to fire the head of a private corporation. So that's ideological fascism in the economic sense. Now we turn to tactics. And many people, when I say this, expect me to say Antifa. And again, it's not Antifa. The most dangerous guy in Berkeley is not Antifa. It's the mayor of Berkeley, Jesse Aragon. He's the guy who has the power to call off the cops. The real fascism that we're seeing today in America is the use of the instruments of the federal government against political opponents. That's pure fascism. In other words, if I'm the president and I'm able to use the FBI, the CIA, the Justice Department, if I'm going to mobilize SWAT teams to go after, to audit, to arrest, to lock up people who don't agree with me, this use of the state, thoroughly undemocratic, is classically fascist. Now, Trump's not doing this. But increasingly, there's creeping evidence that the left is. I'll just give you a tiny example from my own case, because I'm going to talk about what I actually know. The Congressional Oversight Committee has a copy in their hands of my file. And this is my case in the Obama administration for exceeding campaign finance laws. Did I exceed campaign finance laws? Yes. But no American has ever been locked up for 8 months for doing it. Right? Now, when you open up my file, you see in it, highlighted, D'Souza is a prominent critic of the Obama administration and made a movie very critical of Obama. And so even though my case involved $20,000, the FBI on its own assigned $100,000 to investigate my $20,000 case. That's abnormal. So when you see the government jumping in to target somebody, and they say it, in part at least because he is an opponent of our team, that's bad news. Even liberals should be up in arms about that. But in fact, I don't have any liberal defenders. Why? Because to them, I'm an anti-Obama guy, I'm an Obama critic, and the less we see of you, the better. So we're in this gangsterish mode in American politics. I came of age in the 80s, in the Reagan era. And while Reagan and Tip O'Neill were fierce adversaries, they'd go out for a beer afterward. I mean, they could ultimately say, we disagree, I care about this, you care about that, let's meet in the middle. That politics has gone from America, and I mourn it. I think it's a pity that it's gone. But I find myself in this new environment and having to fight in it. So there's no point in nostalgically hearkening back to Reaganism. We have to actually surf on the wave. We have to swim in the water that we're given, and we have to hope for a better day in America in the future. So thank you all for coming. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.